about how public health officials during the COVID-19 pandemic are encouraging employers to set up paid sick leave. So as an employer, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, great, but what do I do and how do I do that? If you just hear a headline like set up paid sick leave, you might think, okay, well, I already pay people 2 days or 5 days for sickness, or I already pay people 2 weeks vacation. Why would I need to do anything else? You might also be thinking, okay, well, I guess if they're off, they're sick, and I just keep payroll going. So I actually wanted to break down that there's actually a better way to do it rather than just doing it yourself in-house. And it can actually be less expensive for you as a business to set up a strategy. So when I say a strategy, there's lots of different ways that employers can officially manage and maintain people who are on sick leave. But it really depends on who you are. It depends on the size of business. So whether you're a small business or a large business, there's completely different considerations. It also depends on your own personal risk tolerance. So I thought I would go through this matrix that I threw together, just showing you like, how do I think about recommending to our clients the way they go. And so I want to really break things into two big categories because it can get complicated. But basically the two choices that you need to make first are, do you use EI sickness? And this is assuming that you're an employer in Canada, or do you opt out of EI sickness? So these are the two big things first. And the reason is because in your, when you set up payroll in Canada, you are required to remit employment insurance premiums. We know that that is the law. You can't get around that. But what you can do is you can opt out of EI sickness. So the portion of EI sickness is actually a sliver of the EI premiums that you remit. So what you could say to the government of Canada is you can say either, yes, if somebody is sick, I'm going to send them to EI and they're going to collect a benefit called EI sickness, not because they're unemployed, but because they're sick. And so you've been paying your EI premiums and you have this product. And just think of EI sickness as almost like a default insurance product that the government threw into your plan that you're allowed to actually cancel or opt out of. So that's why another option is to opt out of EI sickness. You can say to the government, with all due respect, I would like to either manage it myself or manage it through a third party, or I want to be more generous and pay something better from what people receive while on sick leave. So when you opt out of EI sickness, you actually are able to save money because you reduce the premiums, the EI premiums you pay the government. It's just like you've canceled this product, you don't need to pay for the monthly fees anymore. But you have to be really careful. It really depends on who you are. So let's just walk through, let's just assume you're a small business and you have very low risk tolerance or maybe a mixture of both. You can just use the standard EI benefits. So EI updates every year. As of the recording of this video, it's like, close to $600 per week that people are receiving under EI. Also, as the recording of this video, the EI system in Canada is so overwhelmed. They're probably processing millions and millions of Canadians' EI claims right now through the Canada Emergency Benefit. And so you can just do that. You can have people literally get in line, get into a queue. And what the standard benefit means, it's really simple. All you need is an ROE, a record of employment that you're probably used to filling out anyways, except instead of choosing the reason being quit or, lack of work, you're going to choose sickness as the reason. Under normal circumstances, the government will require a doctor's note in order to pay the claim. In my experience, before COVID, were paying claims based off of a very, very simple doctor's note. After COVID, I've heard through the grapevine, and do not quote me on this, that it's a lot easier to get paid because I think they're overwhelmed. I don't think they're actually looking into the sick notes as much. So the savings are negligible or non-existent. And then I'm just going to scroll down. There's no costs associated because you're already paying your EI premiums. And would I recommend it? So if you have a payroll of $2.5 million or less, I would recommend you just kind of stick with EI sickness or top up. And I'll talk about top up in a second. If you have more than $2.5 million of payroll, I would not recommend it, but I'm going to get into that in a second. So instead of you might look at EI and say, oh my God, people are only going to get that much per week. Well, I actually have some people on payroll that earn a lot more than that. And how are they going to make their mortgage payments with $600 a week? or more if you're watching this in the future. So you can actually top up EI. You can say, I want to give people more money. And the reason why you would is A, because you care about your employees. You don't want them to have to refinance their mortgage or sell their house or worse because they're sick. The other reason could be because you're in a war for talent and you're worried that if you actually let people earn less while on sickness, they might actually just look for a job with better benefits. Or even worse, they might not even report that they're sick. So especially in the COVID-19 pandemic, people should be reporting to their employer if they have symptoms. And what we've heard from a lot of businesses is they don't want to negatively impact people or penalize them through income if they report symptoms. So you don't want someone to say, well, I'm going to earn 100% of my income if I show up to work sick, but I'm only going to earn 55% of my earnings. That's the EI amounts to a maximum of $600 a week, let's say, if I actually report that I have the sniffles. So no thanks, I'm just gonna show up, I'm gonna wear my mask. So that's another reason why you would wanna top up what EI provides. It's really simple, it's great for providing more benefits with low risk. I say low risk because the government is still paying that base amount of $600. You're just topping up what you would provide. So this is a very, very simple process. All you have to do is register for the Supplemental Unemployment Benefit Plan, or the sub plan. I'll find a link here. So if you actually Google Supplemental Unemployment Benefit Plan or sub plan, then you're gonna land upon a page within the Government of Canada, that's canada.ca, and giving you an overview of how to apply for the benefit, how to complete the ROE. It's a very simple process. It's basically a one-page registration form asking the employer for their name, their address, the signing officer, a couple questions, and then you have to attach what the policy is. And the policy just has to basically, A, not discriminate against different classes, B, you cannot provide worse benefits than EI, although I don't know how you even accomplish that. There's a few other conditions. You basically cannot pay someone so that they get more than 95% of their normal weekly earnings in total from all sources combined. And there's good reason for that. The reason is basically, if the government's still underwriting the risk of the first amount, if you're going to pay people more than 95%, you almost like disincenting someone to come back to work. So if they can make more money while on sickness, they're just going to keep staying on sickness, or that's the philosophy. And that would drive the government's premiums up even more. You could use EI sickness, just going to scroll down. I think if you have payroll of 2.5 million or less, I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. Or if you have more than 2.5 million in payroll, if your organization is so risk averse that you're not willing to take a single percentage point of risk, you can go with this approach. But I'm going to recommend a different approach if you have a private business that is willing to take on a little bit more risk. And again, I'll get into that in a second. So small businesses, stick with EI or top up of EI. Now, so let's go to the second phase, opt out of EI sickness. Opting out of EI sickness really makes sense, and I'm just going to zero in on this field here. It's when you look at the savings, you can Google, you can go online, I can post some links in this description on what are the savings to EI if you're going to opt out of EI, the savings to your premiums as a business. And it basically works out to $3,600 of savings per million of insurable earnings per year. So I can get into the math, but just trust me on this, like you are going to be saving that amount. You can also think about it as a percentage of payroll. So you're saving that percentage, and it actually comes out to, that's basically the cost of opting into EI sickness. So when I say 1 million of insurable earnings, that means if your payroll is $1 million, but you have a lot of people there earning more than the than the Government of Canada, EI maximum insurable earnings. This year it's like in and around $55,000 per year for Canadians. Then you're not actually paying EI premiums for more than that because it's not insured. So that's why we're talking about just the portion that's insurable. So what you can do is you can get a copy of your payroll, throw it in Excel or whatever software you're using, Google Sheets, and just limit it at the insurable earnings and then total that number. So if that number is under $1 million, then you're taking that number, let's just call it $1 million, times 3,600 of savings. There is an exact amount, but I've just thrown this in because they changed the rates a couple of years ago, so it was different before, but this is basically what it is. Then that's how much you're going to save by remitting less premiums to the government. So the reason why I say it's not ideal for a small business is because let's say you're saving this $3,600 a year, you're going to have to actually show the government that you're reinvesting 5/12 of the benefit back for employees. And that's because the government's like, hey, okay, when you're remitting EI premiums to us, like 5/12 are coming from the employee. Like you take $1 from the employee, then you multiply it times 1.4, and then you remit $2.40 over to us. So actually, is that, yeah, there you go. So 5/12 really belong to the employee. So even though you send less money to the government, you actually have to show to the government that you're giving almost half of it back to employees. That's really important. The way you can do that is either you can show that you have reinvested in the benefit plan by literally introducing that sick leave plan, or you can say, you know what, we've put it into something else, we put it into a bonus program, we've given it to people directly. It's really up to you, but the lion's share of customers we work with for benefits typically say, we've improved our benefit plan by introducing a short-term disability plan, and there you go, you're off to the races. So again, why does it not make sense for a small business? Because $3,600, if your payroll is only $1 million and you're saving that every year, that's great. But if you have 1 year where one person goes off on claim, that could destroy your savings depending upon how severe that claim is. It becomes worse when you have 2 people that go off in the same year. Now, that said, it's extremely rare. Like those are typically workplaces where if you have that higher level of claims incidence, you start to scratch your head and ask your question, like, is there something about this workplace that's causing people to go on sick leave? Like, is it a toxic workplace? Are people more stressed out? Are people worried that they're going to lose their jobs and they're jumping ship and they're using this as a bridge? So I just don't think it's generally a good idea for small businesses. Unless, of course, if you have, if you have a lot of risk tolerance, then go ahead and do it. But yeah, I think unless you have total control over it, it's very difficult to justify. So when you're opting out of EI sickness, if you've decided now, you know what, I think I can do a better job, or private industry can do a better job than the public system of dealing with people on EI sickness, and I would tend to agree with that, sorry, but I do, then you have really 2 options. I've put a third option on here because I actually see a lot of businesses self-insure their short-term disability plan and self-adjudicate it. And I've actually crossed that out. So if you're doing that now, stop doing it. It's never an option. And the reason why it's never an option is because when I say self-adjudicate, what does adjudication mean? It literally means if somebody is sick, they're handing you a stack of papers from their doctor explaining in medical detail why this person is totally disabled and unable to work. That is huge, huge, huge risk. I don't even want to get into all of it, but in essence, it's a bad idea. It's going to get you in trouble. The essence of why it's a bad idea is because it's illegal to discriminate against employees because of disability. It's part of the Charter of Canadian Rights and Freedoms. It's basically on par with, kicking someone out of your store because they're in a wheelchair. Like that's how bad it is. So you do not want to have fired somebody and then for them to come back and sue you because you've damaged their human rights because they think that you fired them because you saw their medical information. So discriminating based on disability is a very serious offense. It can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself, and fees and penalties and legal fees, and reinstating that person back on payroll, paying them lost time, severance, vacation, bonuses, plus a fee because you're being a jerk. So just if you're doing this, stop. Do not get medical in your hands from your employees. It's just a bad idea. So going from there, you have 2 other options. You can either buy a plan from an insurance company. And when you buy a plan, that's literally what you're doing. You're like, hey, I want a short-term disability plan. They're like, great, here's what it's going to cost you. You outsource it completely from your desk and they handle it. Or you can save some money if you're willing to do some management yourself. You can self-insure short-term disability and outsource just the medical adjudication portion. So I'll update that. And there could be huge significant financial savings if you do that approach. But it comes with a huge if. The big assumption is that your organization is better able to manage the short-term disability process than either the government or an insurance company. So I'm going to go down the path of fully insured first so that you can see the benefits. And really, it depends on the risk tolerance of the owner. So if you have, again, zero risk tolerance or very little risk tolerance, and you're like, you know what, I just want this off my desk completely, I'm willing to pay a premium to do that, then you can go with the insurance company approach. So the fees basically end up being the cost of the claims plus 40% fees and taxes recurring every year. So if, when you're first underwritten by the insurance company, they're going to say, okay, so it looks like you have 50 employees. We're going to expect, let's say, 1 to 2 claims every other year or 2. So that's where, the mystery comes in. They don't know who you are yet. And so they're going to underwrite on the higher side. Unless they want your business, they're going to throw some marketing discounts at you in the first couple of years. Then once they start to see your claiming pattern, your claiming history, they're like, okay, this is a high claimer. We're going to start to increase the premiums. Or, hey, this is a low claimer. We're just going to keep maybe charging them an extra 2% a year just because we can get away with it and go from there. The key is 40% fees and taxes. It's actually a lot. Like when you think about really what you're doing, and this is where I think a lot of people fail to understand, what you're doing when you buy short-term disability plan from an insurance company is you're basically just outsourcing payroll, except instead of outsourcing payroll to ADP or Ceridian or any other fabulous payroll company, you're outsourcing it to an insurance company. And there's really no reason to use an insurance company other than they say, well, don't worry, if your claims are more than premiums, we'll cover you. Except the nature of short-term disability, it's really not the same as like long-term disability. So it's not really a risk that's too crazy risky for the employer to bear. It doesn't really make sense to outsource that risk because you're processing payroll effectively. Like think about it. Right now, as you're sitting and watching this video, you probably have budgeted to make 100% payroll for the next 12 months. So if your payroll is $1 million, you're like, okay, I have to be prepared to pay $1 million unless, the sky starts falling like it kind of did in 2020. But if you have one person that says, actually, I can't work for 4 months and I want you to pay me not 100% of income, pay me only 70% of income, because typically you don't pay people more than 75% of income if they're sick. Because of the motivations I discussed earlier in the video, then what risk are you actually taking so that you can't take yourself? So you don't want to pay someone 30% less for only 4 months. I mean, listen, nobody wants to do it. You're going to have to either dump more work onto other people, therefore potentially having to pay them overtime, or hire someone on contract which comes with its other costs. So I'm not saying it's nothing, but I'm saying it's not backbreaking. It's not going to end your business. It's not that crazy. Whereas a long-term disability claim, that could totally end your business. If somebody is permanently and totally disabled, you have to pay them until they're 65. That is another story. So, I would really caution you, maybe do this if you're willing to pay more to do less work. I think if you're a small business, it makes more sense to say, you know what, I don't want to deal with it. I don't even want to fill out the one little tiny form that it takes to fill out a subplan. Although the crazy thing is you're going to have to fill out even more forms with this product, and then you pay more. So the other thing is that surpluses and deficits in the plan go to the insurer. Maybe instead of saying go, I say responsibility. And I say that because let's say there was a year where you paid, $15,000 of short-term disability premiums to the insurance company, but the claims were zero. Guess who keeps the money? The insurance company. But if there was a year that you paid $15K in premiums and the claims were $30,000, well, yeah, the insurance company is going to eat that deficit for you. So you don't need to worry about that. But you can be extra sure that in the following year, they're going to recover that money back. They're going to say, you know what? We're not a charity. We're here to make a profit. And so this product doesn't behave like a regular insurance product whereby, the claims are low and the claims are high, the premiums are low. They're going to find a way to charge you the cost of the claim plus fees. So they're going to recover that $30K back. Plus there will be advisor fees and commissions, which if you've got a great advisor, it's worth honestly, a good advisor is worth their weight in gold. Like you almost can't pay a good advisor enough to save you from risk and liability and all the heebie-jeebies that might keep you up at night. That's a big if. However, if you're a larger business, meaning you have more than 2.5 million of, I will say, insurable payroll, it's not recommended because it's expensive and you can manage it internally. So let's just take a look for a second. $3,600 in savings times 2.5 million. That's $9,000 of savings per year, and it only goes up. So if your payroll is $5 million, it's $18,000 of savings a year. $20 million, $72,000 of savings a year. Now you might say, okay, great, but then the claims are going to be high. Yes. However, if you have a really good medical adjudicator and you have a really good internal person staying on top of things, it doesn't have to be crazy. You can actually profit off of this. When I say profit, I don't mean actual profit, like meaning just manage the spread. So let's look at the other option, to actually self-insure short-term disability, and you're just outsourcing the medical adjudication. This is also called advice to pay, ATP. So what happens here is the business says, okay, we want our EI premium reduction savings. We think we can do a decent job managing the payroll aspect because we don't want to pay 40% of the cost of the claim to just kind of give it to somebody else to like stamp something and pay it. We have a pretty robust HR team. We have a good payroll person internally. We have good processes in place. It's not like you've got one office manager doing everything that has no time to do anything. So let's look at how you would go about doing this. You would have to pay for adjudication services. So that means literally what happens is the patient or the person walks into HR's office or virtual office, slacks them a message and says, I need to take time off. How do I apply for short-term disability? The HR manager actually gives them the form or the process of the medical adjudication company. So that could either be an insurance company, or it could be a disability management company. And I'll create a separate video where I go through all the different disability managers that we've vetted at least. And it basically starts at a flat fee of $400 to $600 plus HST per case, and it can go up from there. So, let's say a disability manager says, sure, we're going to look at each claim and we're going to give payroll advice to pay. So we're going to come back to the business and say, we give you advice that you should pay this claim, or actually the medical doesn't support this claim, so we're going to decline. Therefore, we decline to give advice to pay. The money can go up from there. An IME stands for an independent medical exam, rehab specialist. All of that gets charged back, but it's all at the prerogative of the employer. So very large, sophisticated employers that have been doing this for a while, been around the block, that probably are managing like a bunch of claims at any one time. They're definitely going to be requesting some of these services because they know with their volume of headcount, it's better for them to actually manage each claim really thoroughly than to have like a more loose, less accountable process to kind of let people use the honor system on if they're sick or not. I say that because there is fraud with short-term disability. There's not just a fraud, there's also abuse. So on the spectrum of like, this person is bona fide disabled, it's very clear, cut and dry, all the way to this person is clearly defrauding the plan, is totally able-bodied and actually not, like lying. There's a lot of gray area in between. And I don't say that to be mean. I say that because every human being has their own unique motivation and propensity to go to work. So 50% of that person's disability might be true, but the other 50% might be like, just like an inability or a lack of desire to get back at it. And I say that because every day we see people that have full disabling conditions that work. You look at like, if you've ever gone to an HR trade show before we were all virtual, you would see companies that actually lobby or, nonprofits and charities lobby businesses to say, you can hire somebody that is blind. You can hire someone in a wheelchair. Like it is worth it to hire someone with a disability because of these reasons. So don't, basically in your hiring practices to make sure that you're being inclusive. So when you look at like the range of people that come to work with a disability, whether it's visible or invisible, there's a huge motivational component that comes into play. So that's why A, you want as the employer to stay completely away from that. B, it's actually good to invest a little bit in an adjudicator to go maybe the extra mile. So I say that because let's say somebody submitted their claim, they're like, I can't work, and here's my doctor's note. You don't know, like, was that their childhood doctor? Is that doctor kind of like on good terms with them? Are they buddy-buddy? A lot of doctors are busy. They don't really have time to sit down with each patient. And a lot of doctors, unfortunately, we see through experience, if somebody's walking into their office virtually or in person saying, I need a doctor's note to take 4 weeks off work, they're going to give them that note. They're just going to say, okay, what do you want me to write on it? So we're finding that it's actually the person driving. Not in every case, of course, there are real disabilities, but in a lot of disabilities that are nebulous or unknown, we sometimes call them soft tissue. It's very difficult to assess. So the adjudicator might say, well, we're going to send this out for an independent medical exam. We're going to send it out to another doctor to get a second opinion to find out what they think. So that's where the cost can add up. Basically, the employer is paying for the cost of that IME. It can cost anywhere from $100 and up. I've seen $2,000, I've seen $10,000. It depends on the complexity of the condition. So you really have to weigh the pros and cons here. There could be rehab specialists, but it's all manageable. It's all something where you're basically hiring a bad cop. Now, the good thing is that if you have surplus or deficits in the plan, that all comes to the employer. So I say a surplus or deficit here kind of almost hypothetically, because if you're not paying premiums to an insurance company, it's not like you're funding anything up front, except if you compare that with what you would pay with an insurance company over time, you know, most of the time you are in surplus. There's also no advisor commissions on that. I still think it's important to have a good advisor, but if they're not important in this discussion, then it's up to you. So does it make sense for a small business to self-insure? No, it really doesn't. Unless you have, you know, a sheer unbridled risk tolerance and you think you can really manage it so that your claims are very low, or you don't mind having a year with like 2 people going off on disability, that's different. But generally, I'm going to say no. If you're a large business, it completely makes sense. If you don't mind a small amount of risk and, you know, the ability to control that through good adjudication, then that's completely different. So if you have questions or if you want more topics like this, please let us a comment and feel free to reach out. We are at beneplan.ca, and thanks for showing up.